This is TWiT.
Well, this was kind of late breaking, I think, as we started putting this together. The U.S. Department of Justice has won its antitrust case against Google. This is specifically, now, just to clarify, there are a couple different things. They recently also had a loss over search, and they're having a monopoly in search. This is about advertising and Google's role in the advertising market. So what they basically established was that Google has been anti-competitive in the way that it's established and maintained its monopoly power as a publisher for ads and in creating ad exchange markets. And basically the way they tie those things together, both technologically and contractually, lets it hold on to that monopoly power in those markets. So it's also important to understand, like, again, this is technical, this is legal stuff. Neither Mikah nor I are lawyers. Last I checked. You're not a lawyer, right? If you are, you have to tell me. That's the law.
I do.
I don't know because I'm not a lawyer.
But you're not a lawyer, so maybe I don't have to tell you.
But this, so one thing that is not included here is that they were dismissed the charges that Google operated monopoly in ad networks. Yeah, so this
so
is
confusing.
It's slicing a little bit fine here, and of course Google has said they're going to be appealing this decision. Unsurprisingly, we'll see where that goes. But specifically, Google says that the acquisition of things like DoubleClick, which they famously bought as sort of a big competitor, did not harm competition, and so they argue that people use Google ad technology because it's the best, right? It's the cheapest, it's the most effective, etc. You could also argue that's the case because there's not a lot of competition again. So what does this mean, I guess, is the question. Well, we don't, I think, yet have a, sort of what the remedy would be here. I'm not sure that has been made public yet. And of course, if Google is appealing, that will be pending anyways, right? That's not going to happen immediately. But it is significant because these are two back-to-back cases in which Google has taken a blow over its role in markets where it is a dominant player. Even if it may or may not, think of itself as a monopoly, there's no arguing that it's dominant in search and it's dominant in ads. I mean, those are its two biggest markets. So whatever the remedies may be, they are likely to be, if not far-reaching, then at least impactful in terms of how they change Google's business. It's going to have to make some changes and adapt to figure out how it's going to, comply with whatever remedies the court sets down in this case. So that could be, presumably a large shift in some of these particular types of markets.
It's so confusing. Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is a giant corporation and has done some questionable things. Still, for the people who are involved in this and who have to figure this out and break this all down, I can't imagine. I mean, because as you point out, there's sort of these two areas: the ad network versus the ad. Like
publishing,
the publishing. And so when it's almost like with that, they're saying, we're not going to get you twice, right? You do both. And it's part of the problem is that you do both, but we're going to focus on the one, because if you're able to use the company to buy ads, and then the company also then serves those ads, and it's just very, again, I know I keep saying this, but it's incredibly complicated. And so I think on both ends of this, I'm very impressed with anything that can come of it. Yeah. It's a lot to pull apart. And that's why I think too, Google has so many things going on right now in the antitrust space, including its search, including, the browser stuff. Like, obviously there's much with these big corporations.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of slicing this thin, right? We saw under at least the previous U.S. administration a willingness to take on a lot of these big tech. We're going to talk about another one a little bit later. But, Google, we also saw, remember, there was a DOJ complaint filed against Apple. You might remember that one was also very specific in terms of the behavior and the markets in which it alleged Apple was a monopoly. And I think that's the case here with Google in terms of dividing it up into those different types of markets, specifically like the tools used by publishers like news sites to host ad space, open ad space, right? If you are the New York Times or you are Wired or whatever, and you are like using tools to be like, here's where the ads go on our site, and how that dictates in some cases what gets seen or things like that. That's one market. The tool that advertisers use to buy that space, right? If I am somebody making a product and I say I want to advertise on the New York Times or I want to advertise on Wired, you have to use Google's tools in order to buy that, those ad spaces, and the software facilitating those transactions. That's largely, by the way, a summary, not very nice summary given by the New York Times. And what they were talking about here specifically is those the first one where it's like, the advertising space that's available, and the software system that facilitates it, but not necessarily the case where I'm the person with the product looking to buy ads, which I think makes sense because, you're looking to buy ads from Google. So like you're kind of going into that already being like, all right, I'm going to buy ads from Google. They don't have a monopoly over selling you the ad space that they're providing. But the fact that they do control, if you're a publisher, right? If you're New York Times or you're Wired or you're whoever, and you're looking at who do we want to buy from and partner with to have ads on our site, there really wasn't an alternative, right? Like that's where the monopoly comes in. If you are publishing a website and you're a publisher and you're like, we got to sell ads to make money and to generate revenue for our publication, you didn't really have a lot of alternatives. You had Google. And so that is, a pretty good argument in many of those cases to say, look, there is a monopoly in that market because you really couldn't choose anything else. And so then Google gets to dictate things like ad rates and terms and where things go and the behavior of ads. All of those things let it exercise a lot of power in that area. And if the answer is, if you are the publisher and you're like, we don't like the way that's being done, then your alternative is not go to another vendor necessarily, but not have ads, which is a problem.
That's not an option for everyone, for anyone like that. That's part of the sort of agreement with the business is that you are going to tell people about it. And so, there have been times where I have felt of two minds, perhaps, about the arguments being made. And then there are times where it's kind of like, I get it. I understand where this is coming from. And this feels like one of those times. I think in part, though, it's a bit of a culture shift, a legal cultural shift, if you will, where there was a time that big tech was getting off the ground in a big way. Yeah. And you did just kind of, you got this and you got that and you built this and it's going, oh, look at this cool stuff we're able to do. And that was enough to kind of obfuscate and not worry about being anti-competitive. But now it seems like the focus is there and we're kind of reconciling as we're catching up.
It was the nascent era, right? Where it's like in a fast and dirty. I mean, the same way that when they first started building cars in the early 20th century, they probably weren't doing a lot of crash testing. But, they are getting the whole industry running. And then it's only probably later on, you're like, maybe we should think about making these safer, right? Like maybe we should consider whether or not people might die when we crash our cars into one another. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying it is oftentimes, I think this is true overall and across the board, not just in technology, but oftentimes the regulations and the courts move slower, right? Like things can happen much faster because court by nature, the law is a deliberative, slow thing that needs to examine how things are and the way things are done, and then concoct a strong argument based on sort of like the understanding of these things. And by necessity, that is slower than just being like, we're out here building stuff with code, or we're building cars and we're driving them on the streets, right? Like it just doesn't, it takes a while for it to catch up in that as well as so many other things.
Yeah, exactly. Including driving on the street without people in those cars, which is a new thing that, is sort of, we're still catching up to.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Driving an AI system to do things that it shouldn't be doing. I don't know. It's all driving. Yeah, we, of course, will, as is always the case when it comes to the appeals process. This is going to be years long, likely, and involves so many different twists and turns. And, Google is sort of juggling other antitrust cases at the same time. So we'll have to see how this shakes out.
That's happening soon, too. Just as a footnote, I believe Monday, the previous case over search will now have a hearing about essentially what the Justice Department is going to do or ask for in terms of remedies in that case, which could include breaking up, Google, which may play into this case as well. So we'll, all those things are going to intertwine a lot over the next months and years, and we'll see what happens.